Karen's hand shook as she gripped the tow truck's controls. "This is it," she muttered, her jaw clenched. "Payback time." But as the metal hook latched onto the sleek, black sedan, a chill ran down her spine. The car's tinted windows seemed to stare back at her, and a sinking feeling told her she had made a terrible mistake. Karen had been planning this moment for weeks. Ever since that jerk in the fancy car had cut her off on the highway, nearly causing an accident, she had been seething. The nerve of some people, she thought, speeding through traffic without a care in the world. Well, now it was her turn for a little revenge. As she maneuvered the tow truck into position, Karen couldn't help but smile. "This is going to be so sweet," she said to herself, her fingers tightening around the controls. She had spent hours researching the best tow truck companies, finally settling on a small independent outfit that promised discretion and a willingness to tow any vehicle, no questions asked. The hook latched onto the car with a satisfying thud, and Karen began to raise the vehicle off the ground. But just as she was about to drive off, a movement in the car's rearview mirror caught her eye. Squinting, she peered closer, and her heart nearly stopped. There, behind the tinted glass, was the unmistakable silhouette of a person. "What the?" she breathed, her fingers frozen on the controls. Suddenly, the driver's side door swung open, and a tall, imposing figure stepped out. Karen felt her stomach drop as the man strode towards her, his face a mask of fury. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to release my vehicle immediately," the man said, his voice low and menacing. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had been so focused on her plan for revenge that she hadn't even considered the possibility that the car belonged to someone else. And now, as she stared at the man's badge and the FBI insignia on his jacket, she knew she was in serious trouble. I'm sorry. I didn't know," she stammered, her heart racing. I thought." "You thought wrong," the agent snapped, cutting her off. "This is a federal vehicle, and you're interfering with an ongoing investigation. Now, release the car, or I'll have you arrested." Karen's mouth went dry as she realized the full gravity of her situation. She had always been a law-abiding citizen, but in her quest for revenge, she had crossed a line. Swallowing hard, she slowly lowered the car back to the ground, her hands shaking. As the agent moved to get back into the vehicle, Karen mustered up the courage to speak. "I'm really sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to." But the agent had already slammed the door shut, the engine roaring to life. As he peeled out of the parking lot, leaving Karen standing there in stunned silence, she knew that her life would never be the same. Karen stood there, frozen in place, watching as the sleek, black sedan disappeared down the street. Her heart was pounding, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. What had she done? Slowly, she turned and made her way back to the tow truck, her legs feeling like lead. As she climbed into the cab, she couldn't help but glance nervously over her shoulder, half expecting the FBI agent to come barreling back and arrest her on the spot. But the street remained quiet, save for the distant sound of traffic. Karen took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She had to get out of there, fast. But as she turned the key in the ignition, a sudden realization hit her. She had just tried to tow an FBI agent's vehicle. That was a federal crime, and the consequences could be devastating. Panic gripped her as she imagined the scenario playing out in her mind. The agent would surely report her, and before long, the police would be knocking on her door, ready to haul her off to jail. Her stomach churned at the thought, and she felt the bile rising in her throat. Desperately, she tried to think of a way to cover her tracks, but nothing came to mind. She had acted impulsively, without thinking of the consequences, and now she was facing the very real possibility of losing everything. As she sat there, her hands trembling, a single thought kept repeating in her mind. What have I done? Suddenly, the sound of a car door slamming jolted her back to reality. Karen's head snapped up, and she felt her heart skip a beat as she watched the FBI agent striding towards her, his face a mask of fury. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," he said, his voice cold and commanding. Karen swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. She knew she had no choice but to comply. As she slowly climbed out of the tow truck, she felt a sense of dread wash over her. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She was about to face the consequences of her actions, and she knew that her life would never be the same. The drive to the FBI field office was a blur for Karen. She sat in the back seat of the agent's car, her hands cuffed in front of her, her heart pounding in her chest. The reality of the situation was slowly sinking in, and she couldn't believe the mess she had gotten herself into. As they pulled into the parking lot, the agent turned to her, his eyes narrowed. "You know, you're in a lot of trouble, ma'am," he said, his voice low and stern. "Interfering with a federal investigation is a serious offense." Karen swallowed hard, her mouth dry. "I didn't know it was a federal vehicle," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I thought it was just some jerk who cut me off on the highway. I wanted to get back at him, that's all." The agent shook his head, his expression unchanged. "That's not an excuse," he said. "You should have checked before you acted. Now you're facing potential federal charges." Karen felt the blood drain from her face. Federal charges? She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the thought of going to prison was terrifying. "Please, sir," she pleaded, "is there anything I can do? I'll do anything to make this right." The agent studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said, "you can start by telling me everything you know about what happened." Sensing opportunity, Karen nodded quickly. "Okay, yes, of course," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll tell you everything." And so, with a trembling voice, she recounted the events of the past few weeks, the incident on the highway, her growing anger and resentment, and her decision to seek revenge by having the car towed. She left nothing out, pouring her heart out in the hopes that the agent would see that she had never meant any real harm. When she was finished, the agent sat in silence for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Karen held her breath, waiting anxiously for his response. Finally, he spoke. "I appreciate your honesty," he said, "but that doesn't change the fact that you interfered with a federal investigation. You have to understand the gravity of what you've done." Karen felt her heart sink. She had hoped that her candor would help her, but it seemed that the agent was not swayed. "What's going to happen to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The agent sighed. "That's what we're going to find out," he said, opening the car door. "Let's go." As Karen was led into the FBI field office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She had no idea what was in store for her, but one thing was certain: her life would never be the same. The interrogation room was stark and imposing, with a single metal table and 2 chairs. Karen sat nervously, her hands cuffed in front of her, as the FBI agent paced the small space, his expression unreadable. "All right, Ms. Williamson," he said, finally taking a seat across from her. "Let's go over this one more time, from the beginning." Karen took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I already told you everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was a federal vehicle. I just wanted to get back at the guy who cut me off on the highway." The agent nodded, his eyes narrowed. "I understand that," he said, "but the fact remains that you interfered with an ongoing investigation. That's a serious crime, and I need to know exactly what you were planning to do with my car." Karen felt her heart sink. I wasn't planning anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to have it towed, that's all. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The agent leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Well, that's just the thing, Ms. Williamson," he said. "You did cause trouble, and now you're facing some very serious consequences." Karen felt a lump form in her throat. "Please," she said, her voice desperate. Is there anything I can do? I don't want to go to prison. I've never been in trouble with the law before. The agent studied her for a moment, his eyes searching her face. Then, to Karen's surprise, he leaned forward and spoke in a softer tone. Look, I believe you when you say you didn't know it was a federal vehicle, he said. And I can see that you're genuinely remorseful. Karen felt a glimmer of hope flicker in her chest. Does that mean you're not going to arrest me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The agent shook his head. I didn't say that, he said, his voice stern once again. You still broke the law, and there have to be consequences. But I might be able to cut you a deal if you're willing to cooperate. Karen felt her heart race. Anything, she said, her voice desperate. I'll do anything. The agent leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, in that case, Ms. Williamson, I think we might just have a deal. Karen felt a glimmer of hope as the FBI agent's expression softened. A deal? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What kind of deal? The agent leaned forward, his elbows resting on the metal table. Well, Ms. Williamson, it's like this, he said, his tone measured. You clearly made a mistake, but I can see that you're not a hardened criminal. And given the circumstances, I think we might be able to work something out. Karen felt her heart pounding in her chest. Anything, she said, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes. The agent nodded, his eyes narrowing. All right, here's the deal, he said. Instead of pressing federal charges against you, I'm willing to offer you a chance to make amends. Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you so much, she said, her voice quivering with emotion. I'll do anything, I promise. The agent held up a hand, silencing her. But, he continued, there's a catch. I'm going to need your help with something. Karen's brow furrowed with confusion. Help? She asked, her voice uncertain. What kind of help? The agent leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You see, Ms. Williamson, I'm currently investigating a group of organized criminals who have been targeting federal assets, he said. And I think you might be able to help me get to the bottom of it. Karen felt a chill run down her spine. Organized criminals? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You want me to help you with a federal investigation? The agent nodded, his expression serious. That's right, he said. I'm willing to let you off the hook, but in exchange, I need you to go undercover and help me take these guys down. Karen felt her head spinning. She had never imagined that her moment of impulsive revenge would lead to something like this. I don't know, she stammered, her voice trembling. I mean, I'm not a cop or anything. How could I possibly help you with a federal investigation? The agent leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. That's where you're wrong, Ms. Williamson, he said. You're exactly what we need. These criminals are smart, but they're also arrogant. They'll never suspect a regular citizen like you of being involved with the FBI. Karen felt a surge of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. But what if I get caught? She asked, her voice barely audible. What if they figure out what I'm doing? The agent's expression hardened. That's a risk you'll have to be willing to take, he said, his voice stern. But I can assure you, we'll be doing everything in our power to keep you safe. Karen felt her mouth go dry as she contemplated the gravity of the situation. On one hand, she had the chance to avoid federal charges and make amends for her impulsive actions. But on the other hand, the thought of going undercover and risking her life to take down a group of organized criminals was terrifying. As the agent waited patiently for her response, Karen knew that she had to make a decision. And whatever she chose, it would change the course of her life forever. The silence in the interrogation room was deafening as Karen wrestled with the agent's proposition. Going undercover for the FBI. It was the last thing she had ever expected, and the thought of it filled her with a mix of fear and trepidation. I don't know, she finally stammered, her voice shaking. I mean, I'm just a regular person. I've never done anything like this before." The agent leaned forward, his expression serious. "I understand your hesitation, Ms. Williamson," he said. "But this is a unique opportunity, and I believe you're the perfect person for the job." Karen shook her head, her mind racing. "But what if I get caught?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they figure out what I'm doing? I could end up in serious trouble." The agent nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I won't deny that there are risks involved," he admitted. "But we'll be taking every possible precaution to keep you safe. And if you succeed, you'll not only avoid federal charges, but you'll also be helping to take down a dangerous criminal organization." Karen felt a knot forming in the pit of her stomach. The thought of going toe-to-toe with organized criminals was terrifying. But the alternative, facing federal charges and potentially going to prison, was even worse. I don't know what to say," she said, her voice trembling. "This is all happening so fast." The agent reached across the table, his expression softening. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, "but I believe you have what it takes to pull this off. And if you do, it could change the course of your life." Karen felt a flicker of hope in her chest. "Change the course of my life," she repeated, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" The agent leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Well, let's just say that if you help us take down this criminal organization, we'd be more than willing to help you out with a fresh start," he said. "A new job, a new identity, whatever you need to put this whole mess behind you." Karen felt her heart racing. A fresh start? It was the kind of opportunity she had only ever dreamed of. No more worrying about her impulsive mistake. No more fear of facing federal charges. Just a chance to start over, without the weight of her past hanging over her. As she stared at the agent, she knew that she had to make a decision. And deep down, she knew what that decision had to be. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she had expected. "I'll do it." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for Karen as she prepared to go undercover for the FBI. The agent, whose name she had learned was Special Agent Michael Donovan, had mapped out a detailed plan for her to infiltrate the criminal organization he was investigating. "The key is to blend in," Agent Donovan had explained during their initial briefing. "These guys are smart, but they're also arrogant. They'll never suspect a regular person like you of being involved with the feds." Karen had listened intently, her mind racing with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that the stakes were high, but the promise of a fresh start, and the threat of facing federal charges, was more than enough motivation to see this through. As she sat in the safe house, reviewing the dossier of information Donovan had provided, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The criminals she was about to go up against were known for their ruthlessness, and the thought of putting herself in their crosshairs sent chills down her spine. But then she remembered the look of disappointment and anger on Donovan's face when he had confronted her about the towed car, and she knew that she had no choice. She had to make things right, not just for herself, but for the greater good. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and turned her attention back to the task at hand. According to the intel, the criminal organization was planning a major heist in the next few days, and Donovan needed her to infiltrate their inner circle and gather as much information as possible. The plan was risky, to be sure, but Donovan had assured her that he and his team would be monitoring her every move, ready to swoop in at the first sign of trouble. And with the promise of a new life waiting for her on the other side, Karen knew that she had to give it her all. As she finalized the details of her cover identity and prepared to make her way to the meet-up point, Karen felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was it, the moment of truth, and she was determined to come out on top. Karen's heart raced as she approached the nondescript warehouse, her palms sweating beneath the leather gloves she wore as part of her cover identity. She couldn't believe she was actually doing this, going undercover for the FBI to take down a dangerous criminal organization. As she stepped inside, She was immediately struck by the sense of power and danger that permeated the air. The room was dimly lit, with a handful of burly men gathered around a long table, their voices low and hushed. Swallowing hard, Karen made her way across the room, trying to project an air of confidence that she most certainly did not feel. "I'm here to see the boss," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. One of the men, a hulking figure with a scar across his face, turned to her, his eyes narrowed. "And who the hell are you?" he growled. Karen took a deep breath, reciting the cover story she had rehearsed with Agent Donovan. "The name's Samantha," she said, her chin held high. "I heard you guys might be looking for someone with my particular set of skills." The man studied her for a moment, and Karen could feel her heart pounding in her chest. But then, to her relief, he let out a gruff laugh and gestured for her to follow him. "Well, well, well," he said, leading her towards a dimly lit office at the back of the warehouse. "Looks like we got ourselves a live one." As Karen stepped inside the office, she was met by the piercing gaze of a man who could only be the boss. A well-dressed, middle-aged man with a cold, calculating expression. "So, you're the one I've been hearing about," he said, his voice dripping with barely concealed menace. "Tell me, Samantha, what exactly can you do for us?" Karen felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to let it show. "Whatever you need," she said, her voice oozing confidence. "I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty." The boss leaned back in his chair, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "Well then," he said, "let's see what you're made of." Over the next few days, Karen found herself immersed in the criminal underworld, gathering information and earning the trust of the organization's inner circle. It was a dangerous game, but she knew that the stakes were high, not just for her, but for the countless innocent lives that were at risk. Finally, the day of the heist arrived, and Karen found herself in the thick of the action, her heart pounding as she watched the plan unfold. But just as the criminals were about to make their move, a deafening crash echoed through the warehouse, and a swarm of FBI agents burst through the doors, guns drawn. As the criminals scrambled to escape, Karen caught a glimpse of Agent Donovan, his face set in a determined grimace. "It's over," he shouted, his eyes locked on the boss. "You're all under arrest." In the chaos that followed, Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had helped the FBI take down a dangerous criminal organization, and she had finally made amends for her impulsive mistake. As she was led away by the agents, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced her fears, taken a leap of faith, and emerged victorious. And with the promise of a fresh start waiting for her, she knew that her life would never be the same.